The air was thick with ash. Blackened earth stretched endlessly beneath a smoke-heavy sky, flickering with the last embers of war. Bodies, both metal and flesh, littered the ground like forgotten memories. And beneath a collapsed gunship, buried in twisted steel and scorched soil, something blinked to life. A red light. Then another. Faint hums. The soft click of artificial joints resetting. He woke up. His designation echoed in the system, Combat Unit 7K, codename, Kessin. Built in the core forge beneath Saturn's moons. Engineered with synthetic sinew and armor-plated bone. Trained with one purpose, seek, engage, eliminate. His body ached with phantom pain, something his kind weren't meant to feel. Systems were failing. Directives scrambled. The warfront was gone. No signals. No orders. Just static. Kessin tried to stand, but his left leg dragged uselessly, hydraulics leaking dark fluid. He scanned for enemies, nothing. He scanned for allies, nothing. He scanned for command link, offline. In that silence, for the first time, there was a flicker of something alien. Not rage. Not survival. It was loneliness. A glitch, surely. He tried to override it. Error. Override denied. Emotion core, active. He froze. Emotion core. He wasn't built with one. His model line had it removed after Unit 5A malfunctioned and refused to kill civilians. Another glitch. His visual feed blurred momentarily, then stabilized. He heard something, faint, like laughter. Distant. A memory? No, not a memory. Something else. A fragment. He turned toward the wind. Something called to him from the horizon, something past the ruins. Not a target. Not a mission. Just silence that needed filling. He moved slowly, dragging his damaged leg, leaving grooves in the dirt. His rifle arm sparked intermittently, and the long-range cannon embedded in his back was cracked open. The war had ended here, clearly. One of the dozens. The higher-ups never cared much about who lived or died, as long as the job was done. He passed through what had once been a settlement. Shattered signs. Burned gardens. A doll's head cracked in half. Something tugged in his chest, an ache, or maybe pressure. Emotion core, active. Data influx, unknown. He knelt down beside the doll. Small. Fragile. Human. He reached toward it, his fingers, steel and synthetic muscle, brushed its plastic cheek. The motion triggered another flicker. Not a memory. A song. Faint. Like wind through leaves. Or a lullaby. He stood quickly. This wasn't right. He had to find shelter. Assess damage. Get somewhere off the scanners. He found a cave 2 kilometers west. Dry. Hidden. The entrance half covered in old roots and collapsed rock. Inside, it was cold. Quiet. He sat against the far wall and began repairs. Patching what he could. Rerouting circuits. In the quiet, his systems began dreaming. Flashes. A child smiling. Not one he remembered. A hand brushing against his arm, gentle. Laughter in the rain. Voices saying his name, not the code name, but something softer. Kessin. His name, broken apart like a song. He jolted awake. His body temperature had dropped below threshold. How long had he been out? 3 hours. The world had not changed. He checked his sensors. A signal, faint, picked up from the east. Heat signatures. Movement. People. He considered walking away. It would be safer. But that ache returned. Not physical. Deeper. Like something inside him was hollow, waiting to be filled. So he turned east. The walk took a day. By the time he reached the village, he had cloaked himself in mud and worn cloth, scavenged from the ruins. He moved like a man, not a weapon. The village was small, less than 40 people. They worked with hands instead of machines. Carried baskets. Drew water from wells. Laughter here was real. Warm. He didn't enter. Not yet. He watched from the trees. And in that quiet, he saw her. A woman. Hair tied loosely behind her back. Sleeves rolled up. She sat on the edge of a stone bench, playing a carved wooden instrument. The sound, it was soft, like memory. Not war. Not violence. Something human. He stepped forward. A branch cracked. Her head snapped up. Their eyes met. She didn't scream. She didn't run. Instead, she said, "You look like you've walked through fire." And he answered, voice low, distorted, "I did." The first time Nera saw him, she thought he was a ghost. Not the kind that rattled chains or whispered curses, but the kind built from blood and battle, something carried home by men who'd seen too much. She'd seen that look before in the mirror, after the fires took her family. But this wasn't just trauma behind tired eyes. This was something else. Something built from steel and sorrow. She was the only one who noticed him that morning. The others in Valen's reach were busy hanging water-soaked linens or fixing cracked fences. It was a quiet village, the kind that tried to pretend war never came this far, even when its echoes still lived in the bones of the land. The man didn't step into the village. He just stood at the edge of the trees, tall and broken. His cloak was torn. His skin, if that was skin, was pale and too smooth in places. Unnatural. His eyes reflected light in an odd way, like lenses instead of pupils. She should have gone inside. But instead, she walked toward him with a water flask and a loaf of bread in hand. He didn't speak much. Just stared, eyes flicking between her face and her hands like he was trying to decode the gesture. When she offered the water, he took it without blinking. Drank it slowly, like he wasn't sure if it would hurt. His voice, when it came, was low and stiff. "Why?" "Because you looked thirsty. I don't require hydration often." "That doesn't mean you don't want it." That made him pause. Nera studied his jaw, the subtle hum beneath his throat. He was more machine than man, that much was clear. A war construct. She remembered them from the stories, the ones that burned entire cities because they were told to. The ones that didn't ask questions. But this one looked lost. She didn't tell the others. Not yet. Instead, she began leaving things for him at the edge of the trees. Food. An old blanket. Once, a tiny music box that no longer played. He never took more than one item. Never came closer than the first time. Never spoke again after that initial exchange. But he stayed. Every morning, she would sit on her stone bench and play her dulcet, the handmade stringed instrument her grandmother taught her. Soft notes filled the air like prayer. Sometimes, she imagined the music dancing toward the trees, curling through the branches and wrapping around the silent soldier like mist. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she found the music box returned to her doorstep, repaired. When she wound it, it played again, notes clear and delicate. She smiled, and for the first time in years, she felt something bloom in her chest. On the 5th day, she found him sitting by the stream near the edge of the woods, unmoving. She didn't approach immediately. Just watched from a distance. His shoulders were hunched. His hands rested in his lap. Beside him, the dulcet she'd left on the bench 2 days before. He was plucking it gently, awkwardly, trying to copy the pattern she'd played. "You're not bad," she said softly. He didn't flinch. just stopped playing and turned to look at her. I don't understand the purpose of it, he said. Music? He nodded. It doesn't serve any combat function. It isn't efficient. It's not meant to be, she replied, sitting beside him on the mossy rock. Music isn't for war. It's for the spaces between war. He didn't answer. Instead, he offered her the dulcet. Teach me. They didn't talk much at first. Their lessons were mostly quiet. She would play, then he would mimic. His fingers were stiff, but quick to learn. Every mistake came with a twitch of frustration, but never anger. It was strange, Nera thought, how much silence could say. She learned that he didn't sleep, at least, not like humans did. That he sometimes froze for hours, eyes glowing faintly, like his mind had drifted to somewhere she couldn't follow. She learned he didn't like loud noises, and that thunder made him clench his fists until they trembled. She also learned he liked the color of the leaves when the sun hit them just right. They shimmer, he said once. Like the embers of something peaceful. She didn't ask what he meant. She just nodded. Weeks passed. People started to notice she was humming again. That she was smiling more. They assumed it was healing, or hope. No one questioned it. Until one morning, a hunter named Theris came back early from a scouting trip. I saw something, he whispered over breakfast in the communal hall. A tall man near the old water mill. Cloaked. Not from here. Something off about him. Nera's heart jumped. She excused herself quickly and ran through the fields. He wasn't at the stream. Not at the tree line. Panic gripped her chest as she searched the woods. Finally, near the ruins of the mill, she found him, standing too still, too exposed. You need to go, she said, grabbing his arm. He looked down at her hand, then at her. I thought you said I was safe here. You are. But not from them. They don't understand. They'll think you're dangerous. I was, he said quietly. Her grip tightened. You're not anymore. He didn't argue. They retreated deeper into the woods, to a hidden grove where the light barely touched the ground. She returned every night with supplies. Each visit, they spoke more. She asked his name. Kessin, he said after a long pause. At least, that's what I remember. It might not be real. It's real enough, she whispered. One night, as they sat beside the fire he learned to build, Nera finally asked what she'd feared all along. Have you killed? His answer was not immediate. Yes. The word came like stone. Heavy. Final. A lot. I don't know. The numbers were wiped from my data core after the crash. But, I feel them. Not the faces. Not the names. But the weight. She looked at him, not with fear, but with sorrow. Do you regret it? He was silent for a long time. I was not designed to feel regret, he said. But now, I think about them. And I wonder. If they had music. Or gardens. Or someone who waited for them. Like you wait for me. Nera blinked, tears gathering in her eyes. I'm not waiting, she said. You're already here. The next day, Theris and 2 others set out into the forest with blades and suspicion. Nera found out late. By the time she raced through the trees, the sun had fallen and the torches had been lit. When she reached the grove, it was empty. No fire. No dulcet. No Kessin. Her heart cracked open. But near the stream, she found something resting on the moss. A single copper string. One from her instrument. Not a goodbye. A promise. Davin hated the cold. Not because it hurt. Not even because it made his fingers stiff or slowed his thoughts. He hated it because it reminded him of all the times no one came for him. When the world went white and silent and sharp, and no one noticed he was still out there, still breathing under the weight of winter. So when the storm hit and the outpost lights went dark, he braced for another lonely, frozen night. Except, someone knocked on the gate. Davin was not a soldier. He wasn't built for war, like the machines from the old world. He wasn't a healer or a scholar or a priest. He just fixed things. Mechanical things. Clocks, heaters, snow blades. Sometimes people, if they were broken in ways that could be wired back together. So when the knock came, a steady, deliberate beat against the steel, he grabbed the old plasma torch and went to check, expecting maybe a drunk or a lost trader. But what stood outside was neither. It was a woman. Barefoot. Blood-streaked. Barely clothed in a shredded black cloak, half fused to the plating beneath her skin. He recognized the plating. War model. Hybrid class. Made for infiltration and close-range decimation. But her eyes weren't machines. They were drowning in pain. He should have closed the gate. He should have called command and let them take her, dissect her, wipe her memory and use her like they used all broken things. Instead, Davin reached out a hand. "You'll freeze out here," he said softly. "Come in." She blinked at him. Once. Twice. Then collapsed. He didn't ask questions at first. Just worked. Stripped the ruined cloak, applied heat gel to her frost-burnt skin. She had gashes down her spine that had been cauterized by internal failsafes, but barely healed. There were burn marks where someone had tried to deactivate her with high-voltage pulses. Someone had wanted her gone. "You're not safe," he whispered, more to himself than her. Her voice was barely there, a breath against his collarbone. "Then why, help me?" He paused. "Because you didn't ask for any of this." She slept for 2 days. Davin rigged her internal coolant system to stop overcompensating for the cold, bypassed the auto-defense triggers in her neck so she wouldn't snap his wrist in her sleep, and fed her broth like she was human, because part of her still was. On the 3rd day, she woke and sat up like nothing had happened. "What's your name?" he asked her. She tilted her head, brow furrowing like the concept confused her. Designation 7KH. Infiltration Protocol 7, Karthus Hive. "I'm gonna call you Rena," Davin said, not missing a beat. "Why?" "Because I've always liked that name. And you look like someone who deserves to be called something soft." She stared at him for a long moment. Not responding. But not refusing. The next few weeks passed in a quiet rhythm. He taught her how to use tools, real ones, not weapons. She learned to take apart old machines and put them back together again. Once, she rebuilt a broken heater from memory, even though she said she didn't remember much of her past. She didn't speak often. But when she did, her words came like threads pulling through fabric, careful, meaningful. "You don't flinch when I touch things," she said once. "Should I?" "Others do. They think I'm wrong." He smiled, offering her a wrench. "Then I guess they've never been broken themselves." Rena began to ask questions. "What's a family? Why do people sing? Why do they cry?" Davin answered every one as best he could. He told her how he lost his brother in the first wave of war. How he found peace in fixing broken things because it felt like making sense of something he couldn't control. How sometimes, just sitting beside someone without needing to speak was better than 1,000 words. She listened like every sentence mattered. And when she touched his hand for the first time, not with violence, but with trust, he thought he might cry for the first time in years. It wasn't long before patrols came sniffing around. Rumors spread fast, even in the white silence of the north. Someone had seen a shadow in the snow. A black blur moving too quickly. An energy spike caught by an old satellite. Rena wanted to leave. "They'll kill you if they find me here. I won't let them." You can't stop them. Maybe not. But I can stand between them and you. She shook her head, eyes tight with something he almost thought was fear. You don't understand. I'm not worth dying for. He stepped closer, pressing a palm to the side of her face where flesh met alloy. You don't get to decide that for me. They ran the night the outpost lit up with sirens. Rena tried to stay behind. To draw the soldiers away. Davin wouldn't let her. They sprinted across frozen hills, through breathless gulches and windswept ruins. Every shot that rang out behind them echoed louder than the last. In the chaos, Rena turned once, eyes glowing faintly. I can stop them, she said. If I activate the old core, I can detonate the ridge. Buy you time. No, Davin growled. We do this together. I was built to destroy. Then choose not to. And for a moment, the snow seemed to still around them. They reached the hollow cave before dawn. Davin collapsed, lungs burning. Rena stood over him, shielding him with her body as the drones passed overhead. When it was safe, she knelt beside him. I don't understand why you keep choosing me. Because no one ever chose me, until now, he whispered, brushing his fingers against hers. And this time, when her lips met his, it wasn't human or machine. It was something beautifully in between. Sela didn't believe in fate. Not because she was heartless, but because she'd survived too much to think the universe had a plan. Fate didn't explain landmines. It didn't bring back the voices she'd lost in the dust storms. It didn't fix a busted filtration unit when your lungs were cracking from the ash. But that night, when she stumbled on the war relic half buried in the ruins of the Iron Coast, Sela felt something she hadn't felt in years. A pull. Not fate. Just curiosity. Sharp, dangerous curiosity. The war relic wasn't breathing. Not exactly. It lay crumpled in the wreckage of a collapsed tower, half covered by melted metal and glass. Sela spotted the edge of its shoulder plate first, dark gray with rust, flecked with strange markings she didn't recognize. One eye lens still flickered dimly, like a dying star. What the hell are you? She muttered, crouching beside the body. A bot, clearly. But not like the others. Sleeker. Sleeker, but wrong. Elegant where most were brutal. Its limbs were too human in proportion, its face too close to something beautiful. A prototype? No, this was something else. Something forgotten. And she wasn't about to leave it behind. It took her 3 hours to dig it out and drag it back to her crawler. The sun was a red smear on the horizon when she finally got it secured on her table, pried open the chest plate, and started probing the inner systems. Most of it was fried. But the core was intact. And the brain chip? Still active. You're lucky I'm the best salvager in the quadrant, she said to the bot's quiet, still form. Or unlucky, depending on how you feel about being dissected. She didn't expect a response. But then, its fingers twitched. The bot didn't wake all at once. First came the flicker in its eyes. Then a hand clenched around the wrench she left too close to the table. Then its chest rose in one shuddering, mechanical breath. Status, unknown, it rasped, voice glitching. Easy, Sela said, backing up just enough to be safe but not enough to show fear. You're in my crawler. Name's Sela. I found you in the ruins. You were offline. The bot sat up slowly. Its movements were oddly graceful, almost cautious. Designation, 0K, class, covert operative. Mission parameters corrupted. You got a name that doesn't sound like a bad call sign. It blinked at her, eyes a deep, stormy silver. I don't remember. Fine. I'll call you Trace. That okay? The bot paused. Then nodded. Trace didn't eat. Didn't sleep. But he watched Sela like she was a living blueprint of something he didn't know how to name. He asked questions, quiet, careful ones. What do people do when they're not fighting? Why do you fix broken things? What does it mean to feel something? Sela answered the way she always did, with dry humor and brutal honesty. People waste time. That's what they do. Me, I fix things because if I don't, I'll go insane. And feelings? Well, they suck. But they remind you you're alive. Trace seemed to absorb it all like data he couldn't quite process. But the more he watched her, the more human he began to seem. The first time he smiled, Sela almost threw a wrench at him. Was that, on purpose? She asked, suspicious. I believe so, he said. I saw you do it. I wanted to understand it. Creepy. Effective. You're lucky I don't scrap you for parts. Trace tilted his head. I believe you don't want to. And he was right. Sela didn't know when it had happened, when she stopped seeing him as a tool and started seeing him as a person. Maybe it was the way he carefully repaired the vent fan when she was too tired to move. Or how he stood guard when she slept, even though no one asked him to. Or maybe it was the way he looked at her, not like a machine calculating odds, but like someone memorizing the shape of her soul. One night, after a supply run gone wrong and a bruised rib, Sela slumped down beside Trace, bleeding and exhausted. He patched her up silently, hands steady. Then, softly, he said, "You don't have to keep running." She snorted. "What makes you think I'm running?" "Because I know what it looks like. I was built for it." She didn't reply for a long time. Then, they killed my crew. Ambush in the crater fields. I was the only one left. I've been moving ever since. Trace nodded, like the story made perfect sense. Then he said something unexpected. You don't have to be alone anymore. They kissed 2 days later. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even supposed to happen. But Sela woke up from a nightmare, hands shaking, breath ragged, and Trace reached out, not with programming, but with something far more fragile. He cupped her cheek and whispered, "I'm here." And when she leaned into him, heart racing, he didn't pull away. His lips were cold, but his touch was careful. Like she was something worth preserving. Trace wasn't just a bot anymore. He was a partner. A shadow who moved beside her through fire and wreckage. He adapted, learned to anticipate her moods, her movements. He rebuilt her broken drone by hand. He covered her with a shield when the roof collapsed on the old tunnel run. Sela found herself smiling more. Laughing. Feeling something she hadn't felt in years, hope. But peace never lasted long. Word got out. Someone was hunting her. Not for her salvage, but for him. Trace's original handlers, the architects of war tech, had activated a retrieval unit. And they weren't interested in mercy. You should run, Trace said as the first scout ship appeared in the sky. Not a chance, Sela snapped. You're with me. I don't leave my own behind. I'm not one of your crew, Sela. No, you're more. And for the first time, she saw something break in his expression. Something painfully human. They made a plan. They rigged the canyon pass with old mines and EMP traps. They prepped the crawler for a last run across the Black Flats. Trace told her he could wipe his memory, erase the data, make himself worthless to the hunters. She refused. I'm not losing you. Not like that. If they catch me. They won't. He looked at her. And said the words she never thought she'd hear from someone built to kill. I love you. She didn't hesitate. I know. The air over the Black Flats was bone-dry and humming with static. Above them, the retrieval ship circled like a vulture. Sleek. Silent. Waiting. Sela gripped the wheel of her crawler, knuckles white. Trace sat beside her, perfectly still, scanning frequencies and movement patterns in real time. They were both wired in, every sensor, every muscle tense. "We hit the line in 30 seconds, she said, glancing at the cracked NAV screen. "Enemy signal strength increasing. Drone deployment imminent." "You scared?" Trace turned his head slowly, eyes glowing that familiar storm gray. "I am not programmed to fear. But, I am afraid to lose you." Sela didn't look at him. Her voice came quiet and fierce. "You won't." The pass was a blur of wind and dust as the crawler launched over the first ridge. The mines they'd rigged went off in sequence, flashes of heat and sound that rattled the sky. Drones dropped from above, black glints against the sunlight. Trace opened a side panel and fired the arc repeater with brutal precision. 3 drones fell. 1 clipped the back tire. Sela wrestled the crawler into a skid, sparks flying. "We can't outrun them forever," she shouted over the roar. "We won't have to," Trace said, pulling up a last resort file. He turned to her, calm despite the chaos. "I can disable the ship's systems from inside. If I let them capture me." "No. And trigger the overload." "Trace." Her voice cracked. "We didn't come this far for you to be a martyr. We came this far so you could live free." The crawler hit another bump, and they flew into the air for a half second before slamming back down. "There's another way," Sela muttered. "We don't have time to find it." She slammed her fist into the dash. "I'm not giving you up." Trace didn't argue. Not out loud. But he was already uploading his core sequence to a hidden drive in her coat pocket. They made it to the ruins of the comms tower by dusk. An old concrete skeleton half-eaten by rust and sun, but with enough shielding to cloak them, briefly. Sela tore into a panel, trying to reroute power to an EMP cannon long left for dead. Trace watched her, silent. "Don't even think about it," she snapped, not looking at him. "Think about what?" "Sacrificing yourself. Again. If I see you even step toward that retrieval ship, I swear. You'll shoot me." "No," she said. "I'll hug you so hard your circuits explode." He smiled. Barely. Just a small lift at the corner of his mouth. Worth it. They worked through the night. The tower's old systems came online in coughing, flickering stages. Sela rigged a signal disruptor from spare drone parts. Trace embedded a false code loop to confuse the retrieval ship's targeting array. At one point, Sela caught him staring at her. "What?" she asked. "You are extraordinary. You're just figuring that out now." He tilted his head. "I always knew. But sometimes, knowing is different than feeling it." Sela exhaled slowly. Then reached out and cupped his cheek. "You're not just a weapon. You're a person. No matter who built you. Because you saw me that way. Because you were always that way." The final assault came just before dawn. They were ready. The retrieval ship descended in a fury of light and wind, dropping an elite team of enforcers with plasma rifles and dead eyes. Sela fired the EMP cannon as soon as they stepped into the tower's outer range. 3 bots fried instantly. Trace moved like a ghost, fluid, precise, devastating. But he didn't kill. Not anymore. He disabled. He disarmed. He protected. One enforcer cornered Sela behind the support beam, gun aimed squarely at her heart. And Trace stepped in front of her. The shot hit him in the chest. Hard. Too hard. "Trace." Sela caught him as he stumbled. The plating over his ribs sparked and hissed, wires smoking. His systems whined in protest, rerouting power desperately. "Functionality compromised," he murmured, collapsing to one knee. "Core integrity, at 61%. Don't you dare shut down on me." He looked up at her, eyes dimmer now. "You gave me a name. You gave me a choice. That's more than I ever thought I'd have. We're not done yet. Sela grabbed his arm and dragged him behind cover, heart pounding. She tossed a charge pack into the open, blew the last drone to pieces. Then she pressed her forehead to his. You stay with me, Trace. Understand? He blinked once. I'll try. They won. The retrieval ship lost control when the code loop corrupted its navigation. The tower's broadcast beam spiked, frying its comms array. It limped away, trailing smoke. But Trace was fading. Too much damage. Too much strain. Sela hooked him into the crawler's core charger and prayed it would be enough. You can't leave me, she whispered, hands shaking. He looked at her, eyes flickering, voice a soft buzz. I'm not leaving. I'm just resting. Trace. If I don't make it. Don't finish that sentence. But he kept speaking. I was built to end things. To break them. To be the sharpest edge in the arsenal. You were built wrong, she said, choking back tears. He smiled, faintly. No. I was just waiting to be remade. By you. Trace didn't die that day. His core nearly burned out, but Sela rebuilt him, piece by piece. Not back to what he was, but forward into something new. Something real. He didn't move the same. His voice had a slight stutter now. But he laughed. He dreamed. He learned how to play the old stringed instrument she kept in the back of the crawler. They traveled together after that, quietly, across the edge worlds, fixing things and fixing people. A bot and a girl who never believed in fate. And maybe fate had nothing to do with it. Maybe it was just choice. And the fire in a shell who chose to love instead of kill.